The fires had already been burning for 3 days. Not the fires of war. There were no armies here, no besieging forces camped beyond the walls. These were cooking fires, forge fires, the ordinary fires of a city that had not yet understood it was dying. The streets were swept. The granaries were full. Somewhere in the lower quarters, a potter was finishing a vessel he would never sell. Then, in a span of years so compressed that archaeologists still argue over the exact generation, it stopped. All of it. The palace records ceased. The merchant ships stopped leaving harbor. The scribes put down their clay tablets and did not pick them up again. A civilization that had endured for centuries, one that mapped the stars, engineered water systems of extraordinary precision, and maintained trade routes stretching across 3 continents, simply ceased to function. No single catastrophe explains it. No conqueror's name appears in the ruins. Before we go further, a question for you. What ancient writing system, used by one of history's most advanced early civilizations, remained completely undeciphered for over a century after its discovery? The answer, the Indus script, still undeciphered to this day. Not a single word of it can be read with certainty. Now, back to the ruins. We are standing, in our minds, somewhere around 1900 BCE. The civilization in question stretched across what is now Pakistan and northwestern India, an area larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. Its 2 great cities, Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, housed populations that may have reached 40,000 people each. They had standardized weights and measures. They had indoor plumbing. They had a written language. And yet, when the excavators arrived in the 1920s, led by John Marshall of the Archaeological Survey of India, they found something that chilled even the most seasoned scholars. The people had not fled in panic. They had not been massacred in their streets. They had simply gone. John Marshall did not immediately grasp what he had found. When excavations at Mohenjo-Daro began in earnest in 1924, the working assumption was familiar. Here was another ancient city buried by time, waiting to yield its kings and its conquests. Archaeologists expected temples to named gods, royal tombs heavy with gold, inscriptions celebrating military victories. They expected, in short, the kind of civilization they already knew how to read. What they uncovered instead was something that defied every established framework. The streets of Mohenjo-Daro were laid out in a precise grid, north to south, east to west, with a sophistication that would not reappear in urban planning until the Roman Empire 2,000 years later. The city had a centralized sewage system. Individual homes had private bathing areas connected to covered drains that ran beneath the streets. There was a structure now called the Great Bath, a watertight pool of fired brick sealed with natural tar, whose purpose remains, after a century of scholarship, genuinely unknown. And there were no palaces. This is the detail that stops historians cold. Every other major civilization of the ancient world organized itself around power made visible. The pharaoh's tomb, the ziggurat of the priest-king, the warlord's citadel. The Indus Valley cities show almost no evidence of centralized autocratic rule. No single building dominates the skyline. No royal burial has ever been found. No images of a ruler triumphant in battle adorning any wall. If there was a ruling class, they left no monument to themselves. Trajiko Rakoldus Banerjee, the Indian archaeologist who first identified the significance of Mohenjo-Daro in 1919, noted in his field reports a quality he struggled to name, a kind of deliberate anonymity in the ruins, as though the civilization had been designed to outlast any individual within it. Accounts differ on whether he found this admirable or unsettling. Perhaps both. By 1800 BCE, the population was already thinning. Not fleeing, thinning. The evidence suggests a slow withdrawal, district by district over generations. The quality of construction declined. Smaller, cruder buildings began to fill spaces once occupied by carefully engineered structures. The standardized weights, those perfect, obsessively uniform measures of stone that had regulated trade across 1 million square kilometers, began to vary. Order, it seems, was the first thing to go. There is a room in Mohenjo-Daro that archaeologists call the House of the Priest-King. The name is borrowed. It comes from a small soapstone statue found nearby, a bearded figure in a trefoil-patterned robe, eyes half-closed, expression neither serene nor troubled, but somewhere in the exact middle of both. No one knows who he was. No one knows if he was a priest, a king, neither, or something for which we have no word. He sits now in the National Museum of Pakistan in Karachi, behind glass, still not telling us anything. In 1925, excavators working the upper levels of the city found something that shifted the tone of the entire dig. Scattered across a narrow lane in what had been a residential quarter, they found human skeletons. 36 of them in the final count. Some were found in postures suggesting they had fallen where they walked. A mother and child, the bones still in proximity, as though she had been carrying him when she went down. An elderly man face down in what had once been a doorway, his doorway, perhaps, the threshold of a home he had lived in long enough to grow old. They were not buried, they were not arranged, they were left. The poor man in the doorway of his city, the poor child, the poor civilization around them, standardized, engineered, anonymous, and now, finally, irrevocably, gone. For decades, the dominant theory was violent invasion. Sir Mortimer Wheeler, who directed excavations in the 1940s, pointed to the skeletons and named his culprit, the Indo-Aryan migrations. These were the killing grounds, he argued. This was the evidence of massacre. He was almost certainly wrong. Modern forensic analysis of the skeletons has found no evidence of weapon trauma, no arrowheads, no sword cuts on bone. The radiocarbon dating places several of the bodies decades, possibly a full century, after the city's population had already collapsed. These were not the victims of a conquest. They were, in all likelihood, the last inhabitants, squatters in a city that had already ceased to function, dying of disease or drought, or simply of being the final people left in a place everyone else had already abandoned. What happened next is disputed, the academic record notes, with the careful neutrality of people who have run out of answers. But the bones do not dispute anything. The bones are perfectly clear. The poor last man in the doorway of his city, the poor last child, the poor civilization around them, standardized, engineered, anonymous, and now, finally, irrevocably, gone. The people did not vanish. That much, at least, we know. Genetic and archaeological evidence accumulated over the last 2 decades suggests a gradual dispersal. Communities moving east toward the Gangetic Plain, others fragmenting into smaller agrarian settlements scattered across the subcontinent. They carried things with them: agricultural knowledge, craft traditions, possibly elements of religious practice that would eventually surface, transformed almost beyond recognition in the later currents of early Hinduism. The civilization ended, the people continued. But the cities were not rebuilt. Mohenjo-Daro was not reoccupied in any meaningful way. Harappa was partially resettled, but the grid streets were not restored, the drainage systems were not maintained, the standardized weights were not reinstated. Whatever institutional knowledge that had sustained that level of urban organization for 5 centuries, the engineering expertise, the administrative coordination, the shared civic understanding that makes a sewer system possible, it did not survive the dispersal. It went with whoever held it, and whoever held it did not pass it on. The leading theories for the collapse converge cautiously around climate. Around 2000 BCE, paleoclimatological data indicates a prolonged weakening of the monsoon system across South Asia. Rivers shifted course. The Gaga Hakra, once a major waterway running through the heart of Indus territory, began to dry. Agriculture became unreliable. The surpluses that had fed the cities, funded the trade networks, and sustained the specialized labor of scribes and potters and seal carvers began to fail. Not catastrophically, not all at once. Slowly, season by season, generation by generation, the margin narrowed until there was no margin left. There was no villain, there was no battle, there was only the slow arithmetic of a world becoming less hospitable and a civilization that could not adapt quickly enough to survive it. What the Indus Valley leaves behind is not a cautionary tale about hubris or cruelty or the wages of conquest. Those stories at least have the decency to provide a lesson. This one offers something harder. A civilization that by every measure we have functioned well, that housed its people, fed them, organized them, connected them across vast distances, and still did not last. The script they wrote has never been read.
The god they may have worshipped has no confirmed name. The title they gave their leaders, if they gave them titles at all, is lost. And somewhere beneath the baked earth of the Indus plain, the potter's unfinished vessel is still there, waiting for hands that are never coming back.